This is Lucas with Stuart Peterson Group. Today we are going to do a recap of the October WASDE report that was released on October 11th. This report did end up with a bit of a bullish surprise for both corn and beans. Ended up with a little bit of a bearish reaction for wheat. When we look at the daily price action, corn ended up 6.5 cents today to 369 and a quarter. That was basically the top end of the range that we've been trading in the last couple of weeks and back into the month of September. Beans closed up about 6 cents. Not really any breakout of the range on that one either. And then the wheats ended up closing down about 2 cents. So starting to look at corn, basically the October WASDE report yield ended up coming in at the bottom end of pre-report estimates. The market was expecting a half bushel increase, and we actually saw about 0.6 of a bushel decrease there. Again, for U.S. corn ending stocks, basically same story there. October WASDE report did see an increase from the September WASDE report up to 1,813 million bushels, but that was towards the bottom end of the range of pre-report estimates. When we look at the U.S. numbers for the corn supply and demand, really the big changes here, again, was yield, which decreased by about 0.6 of a bushel. The beginning stocks from October to September increased by 138 million bushels. That we found out on September quarterly stocks report that increase was coming. You see the decrease in production based on the yield here. So the total supply increased by about 89 million bushels. The demand side of things, feed and residual ended up being decreased by about 25 million bushels by the USDA. Probably the big number is exports. The USDA increased exports by about 75 million bushels to 2,475 million bushels. So that ended up with the total use increasing by about 50 million bushels. So when you look at the ending stocks, they did increase by about 39 million bushels, and we saw a slight increase to the stocks to use ratio. That change in the stocks to use ratio for corn didn't really change much overall. We're still basically in kind of the bottom third of the range of years going back to 1995. We basically say anything below 10% is really bullish or really tight supplies. So we're close to that point, but basically in between the I guess no man's land as far as not overly abundant supplies, but not overly tight. The world side of things really wasn't that interesting, just because the ending stocks for world ended up about in line with what the market was expecting. Really, the only major change there was just kind of on the U.S. Production side of things. Stocks to use ratio did bump up a little bit for world corn. To just above the 2010 and 2011 timeframe, but still really tight world supplies on that end. For beans, the yield was increased by the USDA by 0.3 of a bushel to 53.1 bushels per acre. This was just below the average trade guess, but definitely towards the bottom end of the overall range of the trade, as some had the yield pegged as high as 55 bushels per acre. Ending stocks for beans came in a little bit below what the pre-report estimates were, with 885 million bushels. So not really any surprises there as well. When we look at the overall numbers, probably the big change, even as most people were looking at yield, was the planted acres reduction of about 500,000 acres by the USDA from the October to September timeframe. This ended up decreasing production overall by about 3 million bushels, and basically wiped out the increase that we saw in yields. The USDA did increase beginning stocks by 43 million bushels from the September report. Again, these are numbers that we knew were going to pop up based on the September stocks report. USDA also did not change any of the demand numbers for beans. So overall, ending stocks for beans increased by 40 million bushels up to 885 million bushels for ending stocks, and also the stocks use ratio increased to 20.7%. Stocks use ratio for beans still remains at the highest level going back to 1995. So even with the increase there, still stays at the point where it was before, at least ranking wise. World soybean ending stocks came in a little bit higher than what the market was expecting, but not by much, with 110.04 million metric tons. So really not a whole lot of changes there, or not a lot of surprises on the world side of things. Again, world stocks to use ratio for soybeans ended up ranking wise staying the same going back to 1995, 96, but with a little bit over 30%. So still looking at overly or abundant world supplies of soybeans. Moving on to wheat, the October WASDE report, ending stocks for wheat ended up at 956 million bushels. This was basically in line with pre-report estimates, just above the average guess on that end. When we look at the numbers, the USDA did increase yield slightly by 0.2 of a bushel per acre. That resulted in a slight increase of production of 7 million bushels. Imports were also increased for wheat, so total supplies increased by about 11 million bushels. And then on the demand side of things, only change was feed and residual, which was decreased by about 10 million bushels. So in the end, ending stocks increased by about 21 million bushels to 956, and the stocks use ratio did increase by about 1.2% to 44.1%. The stocks use ratio for wheat remains at a higher level, but down from the prior 3 years, sitting at 44.1%. So we do have, I guess, abundant U.S. wheat stocks. World wheat ending stocks did end up lower on the lower end of the range as far as market expectations, mainly due to lower production forecast for Australia and Russia by the USDA. World stocks use ratio for wheat ended up being at about 35%, so basically the upper third of the range as far as total stocks use ratio goes there. So overall, ended up being a bullish report for corn, slightly bullish report for beans, and I'd say a slightly bearish report for wheat, especially given the market reaction. Really, we'll have to kind of see what sort of follow through we see on Friday, October 12th, and see how we finish out the week. But definitely wasn't as bearish a report as what might have been anticipated heading into that. So thanks for your time for the video, and hope you have a great rest of your day.